Since 1994, NASCAR had been racing at the famous Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the annual running of the Brickyard 400, but last Sunday was the beginning of a new tradition, racing on the road course of Indy. Since 2008, the Brickyard 400 has been a slow death for NASCAR. Ever since the tire debacle of that year, attendance and overall attention has been getting worse as the years go by, from a sellout crowd of 240,000 in 2008 to 70,000 in 2013. So when the new owner of the Speedway, Roger Penske, came in, he wanted to make a change, have a NASCAR IndyCar doubleheader on the road course of the greatest race course in the world. IndyCar and Xfinity on Saturday and the Cup Series on Sunday, hoping to reignite the hype of NASCAR at Indianapolis. With the first year complete, we take a look on if this race was a success or a failure. Now we're going to go through 3 things that were good with Indianapolis on Sunday and 3 things that went bad. Let's start off with the good. Let's start off with the first success, great racing. Throughout the years, the Brickyard 400 has been getting worse and worse, not only in terms of attendance, but also in terms of actual quality racing. Mediocre to subpar racing has been prevalent at the Brickyard since the introduction of the COT car in 2008, and really has only gotten worse since the Gen 6 car in 2013. Well, last Sunday at Indianapolis, with the change on the road course, it added a new feel to the event. There was a lot of different leaders in the mix, like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Chase Briscoe, as well as others like AJ Allmendinger and Martin Truex Jr. There was also some really exciting battles, especially on restarts in turn 1, turn 6, and even turn 11 and turn 12, with drivers getting into each other, going off track, spinning out. Sometimes we even saw 3 wide and even 4 wide moments that just added a lot of excitement to the race. The second part of success from Indy this weekend was the attendance. Now, like I said, the Brickyard 400 has been going on in attendance since 2008, and even though NASCAR stopped giving out the attendance in 2013, you can clearly tell as the years go by, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. But with NASCAR coming to the road course at the Brickyard, a lot more fans seem to come to the racetrack this year than in 2019, especially in the infield. The infield looked packed. Also, the spots where there was a lot of exciting moments, for example, from turns 1 to around turns 4 and 5, and even turn 6 we include, it was pretty packed. Not a sellout by any means, but still, there was a lot more people than I expected for this event. Which leads to the third success of this event, attention. I think Roger Penske did a great thing by combining the 2 most popular form of motorsports in America, NASCAR and IndyCar, at one of the greatest tracks in the world. By having a triple header with IndyCar and Xfinity on Saturday and the Cup Series on Sunday, gave fans more of an incentive to come to the event. In fact, there were a lot of people that flat out said that they would not have come to Indianapolis if it was just the Cup race. But with Cup, Xfinity, and IndyCar all in the same weekend, it felt like it was a bargain. They had to attend this race. So there was overall a lot of attention. On top of that, the Cup Series race on Sunday produced, again, a lot of attention after the race. NASCAR and multiple drivers like Allmendinger, Briscoe, Hamlin, and others were trending in social media. And on top of that, NASCAR's extended highlights of the Verizon 200 was number 10 on trending. For a NASCAR highlights video to be trending on YouTube, that's incredible. In fact, I think that's the first time NASCAR has ever been on the trending page that didn't involve a crash being the main story. However, with the good, you must come with the bad, and there were 3 big-time failures with this race. The first one is pretty self-explanatory, turn 6 falling apart. So if you watched my race review regarding Sunday's Cup race at Indianapolis, I talked a lot about turn 6 and how it fell apart, and why I believe personally that a radiator pan / splitter structure of the car that was wedged underneath the curb probably must have loosened the curb, so much to the point where it didn't become as stable as it was before. And it was overall a failure at IMS for not being prepared for something like this to take place. Now, when you compare it to how the curb was structured, unlike other tracks where curb is mainly made out of concrete, this curb was made out of metal. Indianapolis changed their stuff to their road course in 2014 and elected to use metal curbs instead of concrete curbs. It was also a failure on IMS's part to not anticipate stock cars going through the road course. You have to understand that while IndyCar goes through it, IndyCar is half the size of a NASCAR Cup car, and over the course of the weekend when you have IndyCar, Xfinity, and NASCAR really go over the curb, lap after lap after lap, especially with how much added weight an Xfinity and Cup car brings to the curb compared to an Indy car. Looking back, you could almost expect it for it to at least have some type of damage. And having the track fall apart was detrimental, I think, to the quality of the race. Before that caution, 10 laps ago, many people would have probably looked back at this race and probably thought, okay, Kyle Larson wins, but it was a really good show. After that, it went completely down the toilet when you have cars that literally just hit the curb, go flying off into the grass, and some even into the tire barriers, to the point where it looked like a demolition derby almost. And it overall made the race look like a complete joke. Maybe not 2008 joke, but still, it did not put a good look on the sport, especially when you're at an event that you're struggling to maintain in order to get some exposure and get some added attention to this event. The last thing you need is something like this to happen. So that was a huge failure on IMS. You also have to throw some blame at NASCAR. The fact that one lap prior to that incident, there was debris scattered all over the racetrack and that they did nothing to stop it. Which leads into the second failure of this race, I feel like, is the fact that everyone's gonna be talking about everything that took place in turn 6 with 6 laps to go. It's almost like you have to split the race before lap 79 and after lap 79. Before lap 79 was really fun to watch. After lap 79 was a complete joke. The fact that it took nearly an hour and a half to finish 6 laps, featuring 2 green-white checkers, multiple cars destroyed by damaged curbs, and on top of that you had a confusing situation when Chase Briscoe literally dumped Denny Hamlin for the lead. What started, it seemed like, to be a new adventure, a new era for NASCAR at Indianapolis, and in fact a rejuvenated one at best, has now turned into a situation where people just look at the last 6 laps and even think, should NASCAR even run at Indianapolis at all? Because clearly it seems that no one was prepared for this. The third failure of the event, I feel like, and this is a bit subjective, is the TV ratings. Now I get it. TV ratings nowadays is not the best way to describe how good an event did. I mean, with more people cutting away from TV and alternating for streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and things like that, but still, it's the only way we can get at least an idea of how well the event did. So NBC scored a 1.8 rating and 2.831 million viewers for Sunday's race. That's down from a 2.7 and 4.3 million viewers from last year's Brickyard 400. This year's race, which started hours earlier than the 2020 Brickyard 400, was still the highest rated sport event of the weekend. Now that, in my opinion, is an unfair rating. First of all, you have to understand that last year's race took place earlier in the year, in July. On top of that, it took place during the height of COVID, when everyone was stuck inside and could do nothing. Of course, if there is a sporting event to let time fly by, they're gonna watch something that can entertain them instead of just looking at a wall for the entire day. So of course, it made sense why so many people tuned in to last year's Brickyard 400. Unlike this year, when now things are starting to open up, people are starting to go outside more, it makes sense that ratings would fall this year. If you compare this year's race to the 2019 Brickyard 400, it's actually not that bad. 2019 had a 1.9 rating and 2.97 million viewers. Yes, it still went down, but still, not by much. Now, why is that? There are multiple reasons, I think, why the ratings were so low this year. First of all, number one, for some reason you had 3 affiliates from NBC decided to have the Panthers-Colts game that afternoon instead of airing the Cup race at Indianapolis. Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., and Florence, South Carolina. But the big 2 parts is North Carolina and South Carolina, which is one of the biggest states of NASCAR, especially North Carolina. And to have North Carolina, which usually makes up the bulk for a lot of the highest ratings for NASCAR, not see the race, instead of having a freaking preseason, again, a preseason football game, which I think is ridiculous, but whatever, you do you. The fact that majority of their audience weren't able to see the race does say a lot in terms of why their ratings didn't do that well. Now, some people might point to the fact that NBC cut away from the race with 6 laps to go in order to transition to golf and move the Cup race to NBCSN. Some people might suggest that that might have played a factor into it. Although I do believe so, maybe not that much to suggest a big change. And another reason maybe as to why the ratings didn't do so well this year compared to 2019 is because of the time slot. Usually NASCAR races start around 2, 3, sometimes even as late as 4 p.m. And the reason why is because it does better ratings. Because over on the West Coast, if a race starts at 1 p.m. now, it'll be 10 a.m. over there on the West Coast. And some race fans are just not willing to get up that early to watch a race. Considering all the factors that still went into that race, the fact that it still could not hit 3 million viewers on network television at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, to me that might not be a good sign for the possibility of this race being held. Now yes, even though Roger Penske had a big part in pushing for the Cup Series to go to the road course, if NBC doesn't like what they're seeing with the ratings, they might consider going back to old habits and going back to the oval for 2023. And that brings up another side note, the fact that yes, even though the Brickyard 400 was getting boring and it felt more like an obligation to watch rather than a crown jewel to witness, it was still racing on the oval of Indianapolis. When you think of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you think of the oval. You think of the hundreds of years of history of racing on those yard of bricks. You don't think about the road course. Even when F1 raced in the United States on the Indy road course, didn't gain that much publicity. In fact, the only publicity it did gain was in 2005 when they had that Michelin Bridgestone farce and only 6 cars started the race. There were a lot of drivers that were discussing how going to Indianapolis didn't feel that big of a deal now compared to racing on the oval. People like Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Austin Dillon, and more said that they would much rather run on the oval and then run on the road course. Some went even as far as to say that they don't even care about Indianapolis anymore, considering the fact that they race on the road course now. You even had some of the media saying about the change and how they miss racing at the Brickyard, and even some fans were even suggesting that during the race that they thought maybe it was fun going back to the oval and running the Brickyard 400. Even the fans were saying that. Yes, they hated the racing, but it was still racing on the oval. So this begs the question, was this race a success or failure? Now what I mean by this is that could this race reignite some of the fire of NASCAR at Indianapolis? Or could this just be a 2 or 3 year thing and we go back on the oval? I personally don't know. There were a lot of things that were good about this race, but then there were also a lot of things that were not so good. Again, each of them, in my opinion, had 3 good things and 3 bad things happen. One of them should have even happened in the first place, but still. I left that weekend both entertained but also conflicted. I didn't know whether to feel happy or pissed off about this race. And really the only time we will ever get to know whether this race will become a tradition, or at least a new tradition for NASCAR, is if ratings do better and the attendance do better next year. If it doesn't, I won't be surprised if we see NASCAR go back on the oval, and more than likely it's going to be the network at NBC or whoever the next broadcasting partner will be in 2025 that's going to push Roger Penske to have NASCAR return to the oval. I'm going to end this off by saying this. I don't think we've seen the last of NASCAR at the oval. I think in one way or another, I think we're going to see the Brickyard 400 come back in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not next year or 2023, maybe 2025 when the new television package comes into play, where there might be a possibility for it. But for now, I think NASCAR is going to stay at the road course. Overall, those are my thoughts from the race, at least a look back at the race. What did you guys think of the race at Indianapolis on the road course? Did you think that this was a success or failure? And also, do you think that NASCAR will ever return to the oval at Indianapolis, or do you think it will stay at the road course? And finally, do you think that we can get a new tradition on the road course at Indy, or do you possibly think it'll just never live up to the hype of the Brickyard 400, not even in its later years in 2013, 2014, and years like that? Again, tell me your thoughts in the comment section down below. But until next time, my name is Jett from MDK. Hope y'all have a good day. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see y'all next time.
I never switch sides, like even when I die, I'ma ride for the squad, let her ties in the hearse. I've been on the vibe, kinda hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in the